Welcome back. Still to come, Sam Neill tells us about his return to Jurassic franchise after 20 years away.
But now, almost 4 years ago, Stephen Dowd set off on his 10-mile bike ride to work, but never made it to the office.
Well, an horrific crash left him with catastrophic injuries, and he was told he would never walk again. But that's not the end of the story.
Well, Stephen joins us now, along with his wife Helen, to tell us more. Morning to both
of
you.
Morning.
Lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us today. So this was 2016. What was life like before that day? Were you very active?
I wasn't hugely active. I mean, I was somebody who was kind of coming up to 40-ish and starting to think about my health and fitness. So whilst I wasn't a gym bunny by any manner of means, I was relatively fit, wanted to do a lot more, which is why when I was asked by one of the guys on my team if I would get involved in a charity bike ride called Ride London. It's a 100-mile bike ride around London and the Surrey Hills and back again. Then I jumped at the chance. So I went out, bought myself a bike and started training. And that 10-mile commute to work was from our house in South East London over to Blackfriars, where I worked for a company called BNY Mellon, big banking group in the city.
So tell us what happened that morning, because, like you said, you were just doing the commute into work on your bike, and what happened next?
So as I was going down to meet my friend, unfortunately, I never got there. I hit a barrier I didn't see, and I went over the top of that barrier and landed on my head. And whilst I landed on my helmet, I was wearing a helmet, so I was fully safe. Unfortunately, I saved myself from a brain injury, but didn't save myself from breaking my neck. And as soon as I broke my neck, I was instantly paralysed from that point down.
Well, you were aware, you didn't lose consciousness, so you were aware from the moment it happened. You remember everything. Hold on a second, I can't feel my fingers, I can't move my arms.
Yeah, exactly. I never lost consciousness throughout the whole thing, and it was that very moment where I'd smashed my face into the grit. I really hit the ground hard, so I felt my cheek was on fire, and it felt like I'd probably broken something. So I reached up to touch my face, but as I did it, my hand didn't get there.
So
Helen,
and then you knew something was really up here. So Helen, you woke up and you had lots of missed calls on your phone. You thought it must be something to do with work, possibly. Then you found out that actually he'd been taken to hospital. When did you realise how serious things had got?
Well, I did realise it was that. When I heard the message with two of the joggers who actually found Stephen on the floor, two French ladies, they said Stephen's been involved in a serious accident. I was very frightened and I jumped out of bed and my heart was in my mouth. And then I managed to get hold of Stephen's friend who was cycling with him. He was at the hospital with Stephen then. And I phoned him and he said, it's fine. He said, get yourself here, but he's just broken his nose. So then I was tremendously relieved. But obviously he'd said that just to get me to the hospital in one piece. The moment I arrived at the hospital and I saw Stephen, I knew something very wrong, had something very serious had happened.
Well, you obviously that's an appalling picture there, and we were talking, Holly and I were talking this morning. You never know, life turns on a sixpence. You never know when your life is going to change, and you're there in hospital. You reach for a glass of water. You realise that you can't. It suddenly dawns on you just how serious this is, and so the bottom of this particular well is you thinking, I'd rather not be here. I'd actually rather euthanize myself.
Yeah, Helen and I had a very honest conversation. When we arrived at St George's Hospital in London, a fantastic team put me through the battery of tests that you normally have, X-rays, MRIs, all that good stuff. And they had a conversation with us and said, well, your injury is so devastating, we just don't know if you're ever going to get anything back. You know, in reality, you could face driving around in a power chair with your mouth for the rest of your life. And whilst many people live very proud lives, and a spinal cord injury is absolutely the end of someone's life, it's a very personal choice as to what you do from there. And Helen and I very quickly decided that if that is the case, that's not what I want for me, and that's not what I want for my wife. And my wife didn't want that for me either. So actually we came to the conclusion that if that was the case, then we'd book that ticket to Switzerland.
Which is a shocking thing to say, Helen, because, you know, as Stephen's just said there are many, many, many people who live with a disability, full and flourishing and wonderful, accomplished lives, but to lose him fully, totally, for him to die when he'd survived this, is a shocking thing from a wife.
Well, I think what it was for me was the horror of seeing Stephen so helpless. He couldn't move his hands, his arms, couldn't go to the toilet on his own, absolutely nothing. And I couldn't bear to see him suffer like that. And to go from one day, you know, having a lovely life and everything before us, to go to you know, what was that point an absolute nightmare. We both came to that conclusion that I just couldn't, to see him in that state was just breaking my heart so much. And, you know, we're in a very dark place there.
Yeah.
Very dark place.
Well, thankfully, it was a plan that you never had to put into place, because only 3 weeks later, you were offered this miracle procedure, and this was by Wings for Life. Pioneering, not really something that was done before. You snapped it up because the other option is the one that we've just discussed. What did they do, and how did it help?
So, Wings for Life are a spinal cord injury foundation that fund experimental clinical research and clinical trials. And I was so lucky to have been offered the opportunity. It wasn't 3 weeks later, it was actually on the day of the injury. They said to me, you could potentially be a part of a clinical experimental research trial, and if you wanted to get involved, I had an hour to decide if that was something that I wanted to do. And if I did, then I would be number 45 of 50 going through that process. So we agreed that that is something we did want to do, and I was in and out of surgery within 24 hours.
It's extraordinary, really, because unfortunately, I mean, it is quite an involved surgery, reducing swelling and making sure that the nerves around the spinal cord don't get damaged because you didn't have a full sever. But what's extraordinary is that, you know, from where we just discussed and what you were thinking of doing, and you always say to people who maybe are very poorly, you never know what's around the corner. You never know. You know, don't, for goodness sake, don't euthanize yourself, because look what happened. You know, look what you've got. Look where you are now. And then, you know, it's a slow process of recovery. And we've got a video of you delivering when you get back home after all the rehab, delivering the turkey to the Christmas table. You've been told you'll never walk again.
Oh,
you know,
my God.
This is not what you're doing now. Is not possible.
You are a walking miracle.
Look what you did. How does that feel?
Oh my God, I literally can feel the emotions now. That was just 200 days after the injury. It was a promise to my wife that I'd made on day 2 after the injury that I'd walk again, and that I'd be able to get our turkey to the table, and I fulfilled on that promise in that very video you saw.
Well, Stephen, you're an incredible man. You've gone on to raise over 37,000 for charity. You haven't stopped doing the challenges. You give motivational speeches. You raise money for all sorts of charities. I mean, it is incredible. That moment, I mean, it could have, as you said there, it could have been the moment where your life ended, and it didn't. It's opened up to so much more, and thank you for coming and sharing your story with us today. Thank you.
There's always hope.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.